Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from Jon and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite. John Pollock Wai Ting here on Wednesday night, July 21st. Hello, Wai. How are you?
Doing well, John. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Another day.
It's another day.
It is. We almost match. A little bit.
Oh, yeah, okay. A bit of a gray with some white underneath.
Yeah, look at that.
Okay. That's
all.
about it.
Just an acknowledgement, that's it.
Yeah, cool. Nice. We should attempt to dress the same every
In uniform?
Time. Yeah, we should
could.
attempt a match.
We did a few weeks ago by mistake.
Total accident, yes. We were both wearing our OSW shirts.
That's right. We both were sporting the OSW cause. So there you go. What's happening?
Not a whole lot, man. Just I've got a wedding to prepare for a few weeks. So
oh yeah, you do.
Was out today doing some of that, and yeah, just kind of enjoying this wonderful.
How's the wedding planning going? Just in a broad sense for a couple of weeks from now. Now that we are into stage 3, has that dramatically improved your situation?
I mean, yes, it has. In that, only maybe a few days ago, we found out that we'd be able to have indoor dining. So, I mean, it's overall a positive, but it also means that we essentially have to plan for a far bigger wedding than, we had intended on this entire time. And we only have about 3 weeks to do it. Before we were only going to be able to do the ceremony, and we weren't planning on having any sort of indoor dining. No reception, basically. So now we have to basically kind of scramble for, and my fiance is like doing almost all of this stuff. She is pretty much doing it all. So I'm just kind of on the sidelines being like, don't stress out too much. And that's as much as I can really do. But she spent the day with a friend going over like flower arrangements, and we got to pick up all this other like candles, like a lot of candles. Yeah, so.
It's like 10 million things. I was in a very similar situation where it was my wife that was doing all of the planning stuff. I basically went on that trip to Russia just weeks before. Like we had several weeks before the wedding, and then I got home and it was pretty much for the wedding. So, I mean, I could not take too much credit for anything involved with the wedding.
Yeah. Well, yours turned out great, so hopefully ours
turned out great. I was kind of I looked at the big picture things. Maybe that's what you're doing. Big picture stuff.
You chose my walkout theme, which was Juice and Thunder Liger's theme song. So that's
right.
Plenty,
that's right.
Plenty. Yes.
Well, I wish you the best over the next couple of weeks. I hope it isn't too stressful.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're counting the days. We're just ready to kind of have a great day and to basically move on with our lives.
All right, let's dive into things. I am going to give a disclaimer at the beginning of this show. I am so tired right now. I am trying to keep myself awake. Literally, it was a tumultuous last 24 hours for me. Still
no hot water, I take it?
That's not even no. To answer your question, no, and there won't be for days. For days. That's
what? Oh my god.
Yeah, there's damage. There's damage. There's needs to be assessments. A lot of stuff. On top of that, last night I was saying, I finished our show way, and I looked up to the sky and I said, man, could things get more difficult? This water situation has been really rough. Could it get worse? Well, yes, because our daughter is getting 3 teeth coming in simultaneously.
Ooh.
So she cried last night. This began at 11 p.m. And with the exception of one, I would say 45-minute gap, she cried until 4 in the morning. I went into her room at around 4, and I just lay down on the floor next to her crib, and this was able to calm her down. She fell asleep, and I thought I had just pulled off a miracle. So I ran back to my room. Within 10 minutes, she is crying again, and that is when I made the realization, well, I will be sleeping on this floor. So my sleep was from 4:30 in the morning until 7. And I got up, dude, I thought I'd been hit by a truck. That's how painful it was sleeping on this floor. But it was the only way. It was the only way.
Oh my God. Wow. That's brutal. I feel bad that you're even here.
I'm half here. But we're gonna have a good time. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. I don't want to give people a downer note to start on. It's reality. It's life. Everyone has to deal with certain things, but ultimately, this is our forum to chat and catch up on everything, including the latest that Marvel has dropped on us, Way, because Black Widow is out, and now the world is complete with the review from one John Pollock, Wai Ting, and W.H. Park.
That is correct. Yes, we have an extra edition of MCU Later that dropped on our Patreon last night with John Pollock joining me and WH Park to talk about Black Widow. It was awesome to be able to get John's takes once again on the MCU. And of course, WH Park has plenty he was unhappy about with this movie. And maybe justified. I mean, he's always justified, of course, but he can say it in his own way that we all appreciate.
I definitely like the film more than him, and Way, you can listen to see where he lands in between. We had divergent takeaways from the film.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Some agreements, some disagreements, but that's good.
Yes. Yeah, I think we were able to arrive at some form of consensus, if not maybe a representation of the general view of this film. As well, we do talk about the box office as well as the very unique release pattern, I would say, or maybe box office pattern of this film, where it did really well in the first week, and then second week it suffered a massive drop. So all of that discussion on MCU Later.
All right, check out all of that. And quickly looking ahead, Thursday, we will have, Thursday night / Friday morning, a new post-pro-res with W.H. Park and myself, not chatting about Marvel, but all things Japanese wrestling. Big weekend ahead. And then we've got Rewind to SmackDown on Friday night. Way and I will be live at 10:15 Eastern, taking calls and chatting week 2 in front of fans for SmackDown with John Cena, and we'll get into his schedule. There will be a lot of John Cena over the next month. And this weekend, we've got the Wrestle Grand Slam post show, which will be out Sunday, sometime during the day. The show starts at 3 a.m. Eastern, early Sunday morning, and is tentatively headlined by Shingo Takagi and Kota Ibushi. But we can start their way, because Kota Ibushi is off the 2 Osaka cards, one of which is starting in just a couple of hours, and then he's also off Nagoya on Saturday. New Japan put out a notice that he is suffering from aspiration pneumonia. They stated it has no link to the COVID vaccination. It's not a result of that, and they went so far as to apologize for any misunderstanding. It just seems like they thought that it was a result of the vaccination. It turns out he was dealing with this aspiration pneumonia. He's tested negative for COVID, and he is going to be replaced by Honma on these 3 upcoming cards, and he is to be determined for Sunday's match with Shingo Takagi. So, this is... I actually asked our friend Alex Patel a bit about aspiration pneumonia, and one thing he pointed out is that it's one of those things where you largely just have to wait it out. And I don't know, Way. I'm not an expert, but it just seems like that's a tall task. This is not just gutting through a match. This is a main event level match people are expecting to probably be 30 to 40 minutes. It just seems to me really... I don't need to see this match on Sunday.
Me neither. At this point, you're really kind of like setting the card up for disappointment, I would say. I think if you're this close to this match, which really is taken on the biggest stage it could possibly take on, I suppose, in a limited capacity during this time, I think you'd be better off just announcing a replacement and just,
You'd have to offer refunds, but it's not like this. You're not allowed to sell tickets because you've already frozen the ticket sales. And I honestly believe that if you did the angle where Tanahashi has the win over Shingo in January. He's facing Kenta the night before, and it might screw up plans that they were going to go to Shingo and Tanahashi, but you could slide in Tanahashi and Shingo on 24 hours notice, and I think that's a perfectly fine replacement. Like, whatever you have to do. Again, we don't know how significantly Kota Ibushi is suffering from this, but the fact he's off these 3 shows and then you're going to bring him back for just such an ambitious match. It would be one thing if he's in some 8-man tag and you can protect him, limit him. Like, this is, pushing yourself under the best of times for a very highly physical match on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my opinion, it's completely unnecessary. I would rather not see a man struggle through trying to deliver a 40 minute matchup in the Tokyo Dome. I think you risk the match. Well, I would say that you risk the match not being very good, but I mean, it's Kota Ibushi. He's a bit of a superhuman. So, even at half capacity, I'm sure he'd be able to pull off a great match. But still, I don't think it's worth playing this sort of wait and see when it comes to such a big match. Instead, I think your suggestion is perfectly acceptable.
So Sean Ross Sapp at Fightful.com reported today that CM Punk has had talks for an in-ring return with AEW as the most likely landing point. He did note there is no confirmation of a contract signed, a timetable, or any creative plans, just that Punk and a company official have had ongoing talks about a return to the ring. CM Punk is now 42 years old. Of course, he has not wrestled since January of 2014, so we are talking 7.5 years. Just at its base level, Wai, what is your reaction to this story and, a CM Punk return that I think if you have kind of read the tea leaves with this guy, his opinion of wrestling again has evolved greatly over the last few years to the point that it seems that it's just make me the right offer. This is not a guy who has shut the door as he had in those years right after leaving WWE, where I believe he said like it would be his goal not to go back to WWE. Just the idea of AEW over WWE, is that something significantly more intriguing as a return spot?
Yes, absolutely it is.
What if he came in and Jeff Hardy rolled him up in Chicago, and then we tuned in the next week to see what's the follow-up going to be?
Sure, or he could challenge Bobby Lashley and lose and perhaps move his way back down to the ground floor.
What an amazing comparison we have this week of Texas babyfaces, or I shouldn't even call Lance Archer a babyface, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to CM Punk.
I mean, it seems like kind of a bit of a relevant conversation, but it is actually relevant. We see how talents get booked upon their returns in the other company, and you see how talents get booked even if they are somebody that isn't necessarily a star. They get made into stars. And if I'm CM Punk, if I'm any wrestler at this point looking to improve my status in the industry, be creatively fulfilled, I feel like there's only one serious real option. And obviously, if you're in Punk's case, maybe the game is completely different. Maybe you're looking at money as your main priority. But I have to imagine for him, I mean, creatively, I'm sure, in terms of style, in terms of just who he could be in the mix with, as a fan, I'm certainly a lot more intrigued to hear his name attached to AEW.
Benno actually brought this up today on Twitter that a couple of months back, I think this was in February, Punk did just some random Q&A on Twitter and was asked about, stars he's watching or have potential, something to that effect. And he rattled off these AEW names, including Hobbs, Brian Pillman Jr., Jungle Boy, and a few others. And that to me was like a clear sign this guy's following the product. Maybe he's not watching it every week, but he's certainly familiar with who these names are. And to me, if you're watching AEW with a certain regularity and I just think that's going to speak to a Punk that you look at his departure from WWE. I think he very much just painted the entire industry as something that the passion had been beaten out of him, that he wanted to go away. And there was nothing wrong with that. But I think this would be AEW has been around long enough that I think if if this is going to renew something, it's going to be this product that does it, as opposed to watching WWE every week. And I think looking at, yes, I could go back there. It would be, there would be a degree of losing some face, I think, in terms of yourself just internally. And that's all you really have to answer to, of going back to WWE. I think mentally it would be an enormous hurdle after that whole, everything he went with Chris Amon, and to go through that, that's a tough thing to just move aside and get past that. And with AEW, I think it's just like the standard in the ring is exceedingly high. He is also going to come in and be such an enormous star that it'll be a huge get for AEW. And we should, caution that, again, as this report says, no contract signed yet, but just the opportunity to be happy, to be compensated, it seems like AEW would tick all the boxes. Whereas WWE, you're still going in with all of that bad blood, and are there going to be games at play? And like just all the stuff that you left this industry for, you are potentially opening yourself up to. And I think with AEW, if Punk was skeptical at the beginning, I think the proof has been displayed over 2 years of what this product is about and why they would absolutely get as much as they could out of CM Punk and not try to play any games, or there's less questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beyond perhaps how Punk might feel about AEW, I always personally feel that AEW has enough reason to not bring Punk in some of those early years, because they have so many people to establish themselves. And you look at the success of AEW up until this point, they have done that without somebody on the level of a CM Punk. They have done a great job of making stars out of no names. And, you have to ask, if Punk was a part of the equation, I'm sure they would have still done the same, but it would have ultimately meant maybe one less spot for one of these people. They're at the point now where they've established a lot of their original names. A CM Punk coming in hopefully will only add to the mix and elevate everybody else by drawing more attention to the shows themselves. How big of a difference maker do you think Punk would ultimately be if he does come in?
There was a time, I think you could have looked at how many years it's been. I think if he walks out, it's enormous for them. I think if they did, and this is just like me just throwing out a scenario, if they did pretty much the exact same thing with John Cena, but it's Punk walking out at the end of All Out for that monster pop, and then for 3 days, you're promoting CM Punk Speaks on Wednesday. You could also do it backwards, too, where he walks out in Chicago on one of the TVs and he speaks at All Out. You could do that, too. And then you're doing the return and the promo in Chicago. I mean, there's that advantage. To answer your question, very big. I think that this would be just one of those introductions that what we saw from Sting, that granted, it was not something sustained, but there was such an enormous interest when Sting came in that Winter is Coming was outdone by the following week's show because of all that buzz coming off of Sting. I think with Punk, there would be no shortage of amazing ideas to have. There would be the intrigue. But one of the questions I would have would be, like, he's coming in and it would be his promos that need to be top shelf. And perhaps it's as easy as getting on a bike for him cutting promos. But we saw, like, going into that different world of MMA, he was the opposite of Ken Shamrock, where Ken was a terrible wrestling promo, but when it was in the MMA world, man, he was fantastic. Punk was the opposite. I mean, he was very much, I am the low man in the UFC. I am not going to be cutting wrestling promos because that's what people would expect. And it was like not the CM Punk character that I think was going to grab a whole lot of wrestling fans just based on, how he was building these fights. This was more about, hey, I'm just a guy that's trying to live out this crazy goal of fighting in the UFC. It was very different, but his promos would be like, that is what he is going to be graded upon instantly once the insane novelty of just Punk in a wrestling arena dies down. But it's going to be big if they can land him.
7.5 years is quite a while to not be doing something like this. So I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if there was a level of mic rust, if you want to call it that, when he does finally get to speak. But he is one of the best talkers ever in this industry. And I do imagine that it would, if there is any mic rust, it would be quickly eroded away because he is one of the best. And I think this crowd support will be enough to motivate him. The level of ability in that company on the microphone will be able to elevate him into shape really quickly. And that, I think, goes as well for his in-ring. You know, again, 7.5 years is a long time. The guy is 42, has probably taken quite a few beatings while training for MMA.
But he's probably like he is trained shape, all this time. Like I'm sure he's in. You know, this is a guy that, you know, there are no questions about like doing any kind of damage to your body, drug or alcohol wise. That, of course, is the opposite. So I would say the 42. It's like this guy was physically a mess when he was done with pro wrestling, and he's probably I would imagine he's pretty good for 42 now. But granted, like, you know, MMA training, that is going to present other problems for you of just that wear and tear week in, week out.
Yeah, personally, I think, you know, he, as far as like his persona and his microphone ability, like, I don't think we'll even see any sort of rust at all. I think he'll just snap right back into it at the top level. And the thing is, he doesn't even have to say much. He could spend the whole first month of his return not saying a thing, simply doing stare downs with every single person on the roster, and this crowd will go crazy every single time. So, you know, I anticipate whatever, like because he's been away for so long, every matchup is fresh. Every single one. You put him against anybody in the industry, like a Jon Moxley, who he's never really interacted with. I mean, that in itself is huge. You know, and we're really getting ahead of ourselves, I think, with some of this discussion, but it is the top of the news cycle, I would say, and everybody wants to play these kind of very speculative games. Let's not also forget, you know, an AJ Lee might be eventually a part of this equation as well. You know, if she is indeed looking to make a comeback, but who knows? But anyway, there are just a lot of potentials and a lot of great possibility in that company.
So let's go through just a few other things because there's quite a lot to get to throughout the body of Fyter Fest tonight. Raw did 1,923,000 viewers, 0.57 in the demo, which are their best figures, best viewership since January 22nd, best demo since January 15th. And they did 276,000 viewers in Canada, which is a great figure. Up here as well. So that was strong. And then NXT last night, these numbers reported by Brandon Thurston, they did 708,000 viewers, which is their second week in a row over 700,000. And last night was going against the final game of the NBA Finals, which went against the second hour. So all in all there, I would say some good takeaway numbers for the WWE. And the Raw number, not hitting the 2 million figure, if that's like kind of your magical number to hit, but still I believe this is their third highest of the year. It'd be behind the Legends Night and the night after WrestleMania. So definitely getting a bump post Money in the Bank with Cena back with fans. And what is the leveling off going to be for Raw and SmackDown? Like, live fans are certainly going to be a boost for the immediate future.
I mean, it really feels like this would have been the ceiling, because I don't know if many people who watch this show would be so hyped about coming back the next week. You know,
how's Karrion Kross going to respond?
I don't know. Maybe some people would. But certainly coming off of Money in the Bank with Cena, with live crowds, with Goldberg, you would expect at least, you know, it to do as well as it did throughout. But the better question is next week and the week after, what those ratings will look like.
Well, they will have John Cena they put out his schedule for the summer of Cena. And he's going to be on every SmackDown going into SummerSlam. So that's 5 SmackDowns. He's also going to do 2 episodes of Raw, which include next Monday in Kansas City and then August 9th in Orlando. Plus, he's doing 7 of the Super shows. He's doing Pittsburgh and Louisville this weekend, then Milwaukee and Detroit the following weekend, Fort Myers, Charlotte, and then Columbia, South Carolina. The last date that they are advertising him for is SummerSlam on Saturday, August 21st. I think you cannot commend this individual more. The fact that this is a guy that could easily have come back for just a handful of appearances. He could have just done TVs. They have got this guy to really reinvigorate their live event business as they're back here. Like, this is like your best case scenario of what you're going to get from a John Cena at this stage of his life and career, to get him for a month with all of these dates.
Absolutely. And when you say appearing, I mean, presumably he will not be wrestling at these events.
I'm sure he's wrestling at the live events. I don't think he's coming
at these house shows. You think he's going to wrestle?
I would assume so. Yeah.
I just imagine like he's at a different place now in his career where every time he gets into that ring for a match, it's that much bigger of a liability that I personally didn't expect, him on this run to be able to want to risk that on a house show to a small audience. But I mean, if
once he's committed to doing the match at SummerSlam, I think at that point it's
ring time is one thing.
I can't imagine, like, I think they would have to make it so clear at these live events that he is not wrestling. This would be extremely misleading. And I don't see this guy traveling to all these house shows and not wrestling, that he probably wants to be in, as much ring shape as possible at 44 to be ready for what's going to be a match that is going to have a lot of anticipation for it in Vegas.
Yeah, and his style is relatively safe, that he could probably get away with, like, going in there and doing his 5 moves, getting the crowd to react, and then leaving. So, yeah, absolutely unexpected for a guy now who's about to be in several, who's in the midst of being in several blockbuster films.
Yep.
And I'm sure very appreciated by this audience. It's something they should absolutely publicize as much as they can.
Yeah. So with the return of crowds during tapings, we're now getting spoilers ahead of time, Way, because
cover your ears, everybody.
Yes, cover your ears, because you would never guess where they're going for the next TakeOver special. So on Tuesday night, they announced that TakeOver will be Sunday, August 22nd, the night after SummerSlam, and it will be Karrion Kross versus Samoa Joe, because they were doing the double tapings today for next Tuesday and the week after that, which are going to be airing on Sci-Fi at 8 Eastern instead of USA due to the Olympic coverage. But that obviously, based on where this was going, I think this was the match everyone anticipated. If there was any question about Joe's status, there is your answer. And what I don't have an answer for is Monday's booking, which there are times, Way, that we will really be puzzled by certain booking decisions. But at the grand scheme of things, you take a look back and it's like, is this going to make a massive difference? And maybe this won't, but I really feel Monday, that handling, it was just such a message about just, like, I really felt like that was just so detrimental. Not that this is like the end of Karrion Kross, the end of NXT, but I really felt that was one that it really did just summarize, like, NXT and where it is in the pecking order. And here it is for what is a major match that they are billing for next month with the guy that has been your undefeated champion in singles matches, built up for this. Like, honestly, this is as much as NXT is going to get to a dream match scenario with Joe having his first match in a year and a half against Karrion Kross. And that's the care that he's being like, if you wanted to give the ultimate benefit of the doubt that this idea on Raw, it's this unbelievable idea that just no one sees coming. It's amazing what we have planned for Karrion Kross after this loss to Jeff Hardy. It's just the lack of care for TakeOver that we're going to do this week in this fashion and pin him in that way. And I don't know. I just looked at it as one that is one that is definitely going to stick with people beyond just a one-night frustration over the handling of a character or scenario.
Yes. I mean, short of Karrion Kross on the same show next week, destroying Jeff Hardy, and then beating Bobby Lashley for the WWE World Championship, you're not going to be able to justify what you did to that guy on the biggest stage of his life in his debut on the main roster. And unfortunately, as maybe divorced sometimes as Raw and NXT might be, It certainly had I would say, a big effect on, I think, the conversation going into NXT last night. It was the big elephant in the room that they briefly mentioned. But,
his field trip on Raw.
It's taken so much luster out of what would otherwise be a massive return for Samoa Joe that I think they've done a really good job of, teasing but not giving it to you. This announcement really should be dominating some of the news cycle today, but it's been lost. It's like fourth in our news pack right now, off of rumors of CM Punk coming back, and who knows what else. It's just not as big of a match anymore, and I completely place that blame on his booking on Monday.
Yeah, and I think it's just it's a frustration that you watch. Like, if you are an NXT viewer, if you're a WWE viewer, I think at your core you have the direct comparison right now, and it's just like, you watch AEW and you can see something like a Lance Archer, where tonight's show was built around Archer and where they were. Like, this was strategically booked to be in Texas, where this title change was going to have maximum impact. And so much of this show is about making new stars. It's always about making new stars. And that's so exciting. It's not like everyone is going to be a hit, that everyone's going to connect. There's going to be fumbles along the way, but you can see what the intent is. And when you watch something like a Karrion Kross, it just feels that your audience wants to see all of these things succeed. And it's just you are creating the negative that you have to overcome to get back to square one, instead of just starting from the jump that we've got this undefeated monster who is coming to Raw. Like, that should be an exciting thing right off the bat. And instead we have to establish him at this level. And now he has to overcome this to get back to where we were prior to this loss.
Beyond the fact that it's, like a very talented person who does have main event potential in Karrion Kross, it's the fact that he is the NXT champion that is the most bothersome thing here, because he is a representative of this entire show. He is supposed to theoretically be the best of that entire roster. He holds the item that every single person on that roster is trying to chase. And to diminish all of that in one go as somebody who is, beneath Jeff Hardy. Yes, even though Jeff Hardy cheated, a champion should not be losing, period. He let a cheating Jeff Hardy beat him. To me, that's still just as foolish, of an act as losing to Jeff Hardy straight up clean. It's the fact that he is the champion that is the toughest thing to take here. If Kross had lost the belt to, say, Johnny Gargano the week before, came on Monday and then lost, it would have still been really disappointing, but like, it wouldn't have stung so much. It wouldn't have made the entire show on Tuesday feel like that much flatter, because everybody's fighting for, a pretty, like, a paperweight, basically. So it really disappointing, and I just don't see any justification for it.
It's also that, like, Karrion Kross, under the best of circumstances, was this guy going to be a top star? I don't know. Like, Karrion Kross, like, has, a great presentation. They were very careful with him in NXT, but I mean, he's got his negatives too attached to it. But you look at him, and it would be one thing if they plucked Kyle O'Reilly and put him in that scenario. One where I think you could see that maybe they are just going to not handle this guy great. Karrion Kross, to me, is sort of your template of someone that you would think can make that migration to the main roster and be very impressive. But they stripped him down even before the match. It's the loss of Scarlett. It's just all these things that were done to make him stand out in NXT. It's like all of that was stripped down. And it's not character enhancement. It's bringing him down and overcome all these limitations we've placed on you from step one.
Mm-hmm. So we wait to see what they do with him on Monday. Like, what is their brilliant follow-up to this thing? I really need to see it. Okay. But beyond
concert.
That, with him singing?
Yes.
He's going to sing the theme instead of Scarlett?
Yes. He's going to sing Fall and Pray with dubstep.
Oh, can't wait. It's going to be weird these next few weeks. I imagine you'll continue to see a lot more diversion between WWE Raw and NXT. they're going to be telling one story on one show, and on the other show, it'll be a completely different. So more field trips for Karrion Kross, I suppose, in the coming weeks.
Anything else that jumped out from you? We had in the main event, Raquel Gonzalez defeating Xia Li, but this was our a second match with Xia Li over the past month that, unfortunately, this was Xia Li appearing to get hurt after kind of like the setup for a Vader bomb, but then Raquel twisted and kind of landed like with a senton coming down, and they were checking on Xia. And then went right to the finish afterwards. Fightful reporting after that she appeared to be okay in the back and not heard anything beyond that. But hopefully this was nothing too serious. But it was kind of just an awkward way that they had to end this, but enough that they felt comfortable going to a finish.
Yeah, you never really want to see, these sort of live occurrences in a match. Hopefully she's okay. It's a very young career, and already in her time on TV, 2 incidents. And this one, I wouldn't say any fault of hers. So I hope it doesn't reflect poorly on her.
And they announced next week Adam Cole against Bronson Reed, Pete Dunne and Oney Lorcan against Thatcher and Ciampa, and Carmelo Hayes against Josh Briggs in the Breakout Tournament. And again, they've taped today, next week, and the following week. So those are already there, and probably most of the TakeOver card should be put together because they only have a month to build this up. So all of your news can be found at postwrestling.com. A lot of great stuff put up today by Andrew Thompson, so go check that out on the website. And tonight we go to Garland, Texas at the Curtis Culwell Center, and my good luck just kept going because I sat down at 8:15. My DVR was not recording Dynamite, so I missed the first 15 minutes of the show and picked things up as Sean Spears was in the midst of going to use his chair. So was there anything significant off the top that I missed? I missed the entrances and the first half of this match.
Honestly, not really. They started right with the entrances here. They announced the stipulation of the match.
Crowd sounded amazing. I'm sure for Jericho, it was through the roof.
6,000 fans, according to WrestleTix. So very healthy crowd. MJF was on commentary for this, and he made a dig at Jericho. Even though that's called the labor of Jericho, he made a dig about doesn't mean Jericho is in labor, even though it might look like he is. So fans were really with Jericho. You didn't miss a whole lot.
Yeah, well, where it picked up was Spears had the chair raised, and of course, Spears was allowed to use the chair. Jericho could not, and Jericho stops him and applies the walls to this thunderous roar. And Tully Blanchard gets on the apron, distracting Aubrey Edwards. Jericho has the walls still applied, and Spears taps. Sammy Guevara comes down. Dude, this dude is so popular right now. They're going nuts for Sammy. He yanks Tully, ducks a punch, and gets rid of him. Spears lands a chair shot to get free of the walls and hits the C4 for a big near fall. Then tries one using the chair. It's countered. Spears gets thrown into the corner where there's a chair set up into a Judas effect, and Jericho wins to the big pop. So, this sounded like this crowd loved this.
First of all, it was an amazing crowd the entire night. They elevated everything, but especially when it comes to the superstars, when it comes to Chris Jericho, they loved everything he did. And it's been a lot of fun watching Jericho work as a babyface again. He pulled off a beautiful looking top rope Frankensteiner here that just looked like exactly like the way it did from his cruiserweight days. Everything he was doing was very effective. Sammy's run-in received an insane reaction, and man, it's just like, it's so great to have these crowds back because you could see who are truly stars to these live audiences. Sammy's stock has grown so much, since the start of the pandemic era. So, man, he was great. Spears, I thought, was a really solid first obstacle for Jericho to overcome. But, I mean, the talk coming out of this will be, of course, the stipulation for next week.
That's right, because MJF announces that if anyone else comes out to help Jericho throughout these labors, the deal's off and you won't get a match with me. And labor number 2 is a no DQ match next week against the most sadistic man in the industry. Someone who stabbed a man in the jugular and robbed a bank without a mask. I loved how slow he let these words come out, where this... I liked a lot of this for several reasons. Number one is that I think everyone just assumed that by starting with Spears, he's just going to go through the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you get like the most left field of choices as he reveals that Nick Gage is going to wrestle Chris Jericho on national television next week. And my God, is this how you make an announcement for people to be excited next week? This was tremendous.
To some people, this topped the CM Punk rumors today. You know, Nick Gage being a part of AEW, not necessarily full-time, but at least having... I mean, Nick Gage being on national TV, I think is big news. Nick Gage having a match with Chris Jericho is massive news. And a match like this happening, like, out of nowhere, completely cold, without any prior mention of Nick Gage on this television show, nothing like this would ever happen in any...
And the promotion. Reaction he got, this audience went nuts for a guy that has never been on national television, save for the Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Yes. You know, it would never happen in any professional wrestling promotion on national TV, except for an AEW and their reverence for their diehard fan base. They are a promotion that, you know, really caters to that underground fan. And some might say that's for better or for worse. In this case, to this live audience, it was absolutely for the better. They loved this announcement. They reacted huge for it. Nick Gage, to me, is another Eddie Kingston, maybe even more so. You know, a guy who can come out from out of nowhere and be immediately treated as a superstar, just coming from the underground. So, you know, he's of course going to be a massive babyface. I think immediately, if he ends up being a full-time guy, he is going to be one of the top babyfaces in this company. Coming in under MJF, I feel like we can safely predict that he is going to somehow turn on MJF at the end of it. And, you know, we'll see. I mean, I feel like if this is the first step, I feel like he's as good as in AEW, barring any other, I don't know, complications or whatever. Can he even cross the border if they do cross the border eventually?
That will be a question for another day, I guess. Yeah, that could be an issue. But I mean, they don't have any dates scheduled outside of the U.S., so they're good for now. I know it's the biggest match that the company has ever promoted, but I would really make a play that I think Moxley and Gage should be at All Out and not a Game Changer show. Like,
even if it happens a Game Changer, like, it's still fresh for All Out. It's such a smaller audience when you're talking about Game Changer.
Like, it's a big match for Game Changer. Like, it's the biggest match that they can advertise and deliver. But that to me is like, that match happening at All Out would be enormous. And I'm with you. Like, I think Nick Gage is going to be so welcomed, and this unbelievable babyface reception that he is going to get, that I just can't imagine this being a one and done with him. No, that the audience is going to just want to see so many more matches with this guy.
I would say, is like, he feels like he's one of those names that has remained on the underground unsigned by a major promotion that, you know, really, I feel like is a sure thing. I think like the Eddie Kingston experiment has been sign enough that there are certain names that are out there that can immediately walk onto AEW and be perceived as a main eventer, to be put into a match against the Chris Jericho, and people will immediately react to it. Nick Gage was at the top of that list. But you look at like what he's doing right now with Matt Cardona. You could put Nick Gage against anybody on that,
which is this weekend,
roster.
By the way, that match.
Yes, you could put him against anybody on that AEW roster, and it'll be an attractive match because it's going to be unpredictable because it's Nick Gage. I hope that they don't overuse him, because he has
he should be an attraction. He should be an attraction. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that, like, with this roster, for all we say about how packed this roster is, like, it doesn't have that reliance on someone wrestling every single week. Like, you can space out a lot of stuff with this roster, and I think it's like, I really feel Tony Khan is going with kind of like the Game of Thrones theory of like, you have all these characters that are attached in this world, but you can insert people and strategically, have all those pieces on the chessboard, but you don't have to have representation by every individual on a weekly basis. You can weave people in and out. And I've got to say that I think they're doing a pretty good job with this, with such an enormous roster, that I'm not as convinced is this detriment as we might have viewed it at a time months ago.
It's like turning on a Marvel show, and it's like, this character from this other show comes onto this show. It's got that same sort of big universe feeling that, the world of AEW is bigger than what you just see on its screen. And that's wonderfully exciting. The fact that they get to retain their identities and their names straight out of, GCW or any other show. It's pretty wild, honestly, when you sit back and think about it. Like the amount of people that are in play in this universe. Like we have, and really in wrestling in general, outside of the WWE, we have Bullet Club members now on Impact and AEW. We have just everybody kind of intermingling and mixing, and it's unpredictable and it's awesome.
Miro did a video stating there were many champions before me, but there will be none after. He's defending his title at Homecoming on August 4th at Daly's Place. He is God's favorite champion, but we don't know who he will defend it against.
It's interesting that they've chosen this kind of labors of Jericho to introduce somebody like Nick Gage, because I think a role like that would be traditionally saved for like a TNT title challenge, right? Against a guy like Miro. But maybe they have different types of plans for Miro's TNT title run. He's not necessarily doing like an open challenge to everybody type of thing. And, inevitably, the booking will probably have to result in Miro winning. Not to say Nick Gage would beat Jericho at all, but yeah, it's just interesting to see them like kind of play around with, a chip like that.
You've also brought up the fact that these future like labors, the expectations are going to go through the roof now. Like it's going to be, I don't think you can just snap back and go to Wardlow week 3. But it's going to be really tough to pull off something to the level of a Nick Gage. That's a pretty big one to pull out at number 2.
Do you think they would have been surprised by his reaction tonight?
No. I was not surprised by it either. I think that really does show you the, that Nick Gage has, that even at a base level, I think there's and maybe it's through the Arquette stuff, that there's at least a knowledge of who Nick Gage is between Dark Side of the Ring and the Arquette publicity from a few years ago. Doc Gallows against Frankie Kazarian. Gallows and Anderson came out with the Impact Tag titles they won over the weekend, and they promoted that over 15,000 tickets have been sold to Arthur Ashe Stadium, but they do note we are not sold out. There are still tickets left. So keep buying them.
Yeah, what do you think the ceiling is for that show?
Well, the story was that they had a configuration for like 16 or so, but they could go up to 19 if they need to.
Okay.
So it would seem like if there's the fact they've sold 15 already without a card, without like
Davey's going to the show.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Does he have tickets?
I think so.
All right. Gallows is in control. They went through the break, and then Kazarian leg drops Anderson through the rope, and then turns into a head kick and is hit with the Gallows pole in 6 minutes and 28 seconds. Gallows getting the victory, and the Magic Killers.
He calls the match the Gallows pole?
The Gallows pole, the choke bomb.
Like Pole?
Yes. Yes, this
is
in
a
survey.
Supposed to mean?
Well, what do you think it's supposed to mean, Wai?
Okay, fine. Yeah, I guess I should have expected from a guy who makes nonstop boner jokes. All right. The match was kind of there. I was expecting a bigger comeback for Kaz. They just kind of killed him off here. For a guy who I would say has been building up some decent steam, coming in for some pretty hot run-ins. He just kind of felt like a bit of an afterthought, but maybe that was done as a sacrifice to bolster the Elite ahead of this Page stuff.
I think that's what they're doing. I just think that they're having the Elite run roughshod over everyone, and there are going to be sacrificial lambs in this, and that's kind of how it felt like. Not a match that really stuck in my memory by the end of this show.
Okay, Kate in the chat is telling me that Gallows pole is an actual item, like part of a hangman's noose. So it's a real thing.
You just put your mind in the gutter and took us all there with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gallows pole. Okay, you learn something new from wrestling every day.
Kenny Omega and Don Callis come out and announce that this is what happens when you mess with the Elite. Omega tells Kazarian he's been a thorn in their side, and out comes Hangman Page with his beer to attack Gallows and Anderson, while Omega and Callis just flee the scene. Dark Order's out. It ends with a buckshot lariat on Anderson, and then John Silver hands Page back his beer.
Worked really well tonight, too. Yeah.
It's kind of a retread of last week, but got over. Like, the crowd reacted in a big way. But this was sort of just, you wanted a presence of the two factions before they have the elimination match, which will be next week.
So, one of my first reactions when it came to the CM Punk stuff is the fact that if it is going to take place in Chicago, how do you make sure that coming out of the show, the talk of the show is still going to be Hangman Page and that he won't be overshadowed by all that other stuff?
I mean, there's no guarantee. Like, if the show ends with Punk, that's going to be the story at the end of All Out. And again, like, there's no, like, it's a very interesting way. Like, if they sign him, what is the best way to introduce him? Do you advertise him for TV and get an enormous number, but save something for, like, he comes out in Chicago on TV, and then the pay-per-view, he's going to explain what he's here for, and you could put that in the middle of the show, and Page still gets his crowning moment, but, Punk cuts a big promo in the middle of the show, or starts the show, or however you want to use him. Like, but if you go off the air with Punk, like, that is your headline. That is the top story.
I think even if you have Punk in the middle of the show, I feel like that's still the headline. That's still the top story.
It might be.
Unless they have Punk pair, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, everybody. Okay, but it's fun to speculate, so we are. Unless they pair Punk with Page to keep Page in the spotlight while putting Punk's name in there as well. But, I mean, there are several ways they could slice it, I suppose.
Then we had Dasha backstage with Brian Cage, and they go to a promo from earlier in the day with Team Taz, and Ricky Starks is going to have the biggest celebration in entertainment history next week in Charlotte. And Brian Cage loves celebration. So championship celebrations, I can't get enough of these. There are just, you win a title, you celebrate.
You wait 2 weeks and you celebrate.
Yeah. You need a week off to prepare. You know this way about planning a big celebration. Yeah. It takes time.
Yeah, restrictions, like you got to get the floral arrangements. I mean, it's going to be a big party next week.
Wheeler Yuta was back this week alongside Orange Cassidy with him in his corner against Darby Allin, who was backed up by Sting. And was he backed up? Darby's ribs are taped from the coffin drop last week and the match with Ethan Page. No Ethan Page. So he was selling the effects of the tombstone, or the coffin.
The man was put into a coffin and then coffin dropped deeper into that coffin. Yeah, I don't think he should be showing up the next week.
They showed Hikuleo in the audience, who was just taking in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yuta.
What should he be doing? Should have just been walking around?
I don't know. Did he have a ticket? Like, what was he? How did he get this seat? This was a pretty hot ticket in Texas.
VIP access, I'm sure.
Yuta did this bridge out of a pin, and then Darby just hooked the arms and immediately used this crucifix. There was a superplex by Darby, and his ribs are hurt. And we go to the floor, and Orange Cassidy and Sting have a face-off. The hands go in the pockets, and then Sting and Orange Cassidy exchange the light kicks. They then do their light super kick, and then Sting beats his chest in the most comedic fashion. This moment, this 38 seconds, is probably going to be the most shared thing out of this show. This engage, I think, were the big viral moments of the show. Audience loved this. Online and in the arena.
Yeah, I couldn't have pictured a better mixing of past and present generations than this specific scene of Orange Cassidy interacting with Sting and Sting doing the laziest chest beats in his entire career. I'm loving whenever Sting is able to show a sense of humor. There's something about like a guy who appears in like crow face paint coming out with that serious music with a baseball bat and showing that personality behind it all, and not taking it so seriously. Sting has really found like a great place amongst this very young roster.
He's dad. He's just dad trying to hang out with the kids.
But he's cool dad. You know, like
He's not quite cool dad. He wants to be cool dad, and that makes him endearing dad.
No, he is cool dad because he gets all the jokes. He is in on it. You know, like he's like, yeah, he drives Darby to work, but you know when Darby says, "Dad, stay home. Don't come to the soccer game today," he stays home. He's like, he has enough trust in the guy. He breaks windows when the kids break the windows. He'll play along.
He's Eugene Levy from American Pie.
No, he's way cooler than Eugene Levy.
No, I think that's a pretty good comparison.
All right.
Darby is distracted by all of this. They trade crucifix, and then Darby hits the stunner and coffin drop for the win in 422. Both weeks, I think that Wheeler Yuta has done a very good job in these matches. Darby's a great opponent to have, but this was a pretty entertaining 4 minutes and 22 seconds of a presentation, because I want to include Cassidy and Sting in all of this. But I don't think Yuta got overshadowed in any of this, and very easily he could have, with all that was going on here and being a showcase for Darby to rehabilitate himself. Like, the Wheeler Yuta has done very well.
I agree. You know, even though storyline-wise, there's really nothing attached to Yuta coming out of this. This is the type of the type of promotion where fans are actually paying attention to the matches and they appreciate quality of in-ring work, which Yuta has been able to display these past 2 weeks. So, you know, he just has to do this repeatedly, can perform at this consistent level, and I feel like the fans will already be, ready to accept a bigger story for him. I will say though, like, there was one point here where Jim Ross called out, like, hey, I don't know why Yuta and Orange Cassidy are together. And usually, like, sometimes people would criticize JR for like calling out, like identifying something that doesn't necessarily help the show. In this case, I absolutely agree with JR, because they've never explained on Dynamite why these two are together. And so Excalibur had to say here that, yeah, Yuta is the protege of Orange Cassidy. Like, these are things that at least if you're watching Dynamite, you wouldn't be aware of. So I do feel like there are some things like that do require them catching the audience up on.
The Blade then jumped Orange Cassidy with the brass knuckles, because they are scheduled for a match later in the show. And they did a history of Lance Archer and Jon Moxley, complete with footage of their Wrestle Kingdom match from last year, and the two cutting promos on one another, which will be in the main event slot tonight. Because next was Britt Baker and Nyla Rose for the Women's Championship. This was a very interesting match to watch as it progressed. Early on.
You know what? Like, we talked last week about like whether or not the IWGP U.S. title match would main event, or this match would main event. There's no way this would have been able to main event above the U.S. title match.
No, and again, what also goes into that is also what do you have planned? Once you see the layout of all of this, I mean, very easy. But, thinking about it, like, this was definitely the right call, I think, to put the death match on last for many reasons. Listen, the first half of this match, I thought these two really struggled. They were very off. I thought they got into way too much of a reliance on just near falls. And it's great when near falls intensify the audience with the reactions being hotter and hotter. When they're going down, it's the opposite effect. And it just seemed like there was this very sloppy crucifix bomb by Baker. And like, the match, just to me, it was not clicking. And then they did the Guerrero spots where first Britt threw the belt to Nyla with the ref's back turned and went down on her back. But then Nyla sent it back to Britt and she gets caught. The audience loved this. And it led to a beast bomb where
they're doing it all in front of Vicky as well.
Right. You have Vicky at ringside. Yeah. Yes. Who I guess has coached Nyla the art of, throwing a belt back. You don't have to hold on to the belt if she throws it at you. It's not glued. You can throw it back. All those Van Daminators that Van Dam delivered, the guy didn't have to hold that chair. He could have thrown it back. So she hits the beast bomb. And I think, like, this audience, this was the first time they actually believed, oh my God, she's going to lose this belt. She'll win it back in Pittsburgh. No, it's a near fall. But they totally bid on this near fall. And then Baker is able to roll over and get the lockjaw. And dude, the place exploded for the submission. So by the end, they had this crowd, but they had quite the journey to get there. It went 12 minutes and 7 seconds. But I mean, great reaction for the final minute or so.
See, I agree that there was maybe a little bit of sloppiness in there. It was, I think, maybe far from the perfect technical match, but I thought the crowd was reacting pretty strong for the entire thing. And for me, maybe that hit a lot of maybe some of the other errors that were in here. I found the match like thoroughly entertaining. I thought the crowd was fully engaged throughout it. I was impressed by Nyla's confidence and comfortability. And, you know, Britt, yeah, again, maybe not a perfect match from her, but she's so over that the crowd is going to excuse maybe a lot of imperfection. So I thought it was like a strong first title win, but I also understand if, you know, some of the tripping up got in the way of your enjoyment.
No, I don't want to paint this like like this was bad. I thought there were elements of it that just they just did not seem to be clicking all that well. But I mean, they certainly had, like, you could see what they had structured out here, and it was just varying degrees of success that they had towards this. But there were some moments on this where I thought they were losing this audience because they did start off like super behind Baker, and I think wanting to be really into this match, and it just seemed like they did recover, and it ended strong. So I think like by the end of it, they got to where they needed to be. That said, with Baker, I really hope they have something big planned for her for those Pittsburgh shows, which are several weeks away. But those are, to me, I think that's a bigger series of shows than even what her All Out program is. Like, she is going to be the biggest superstar, especially that first show, the Dynamite that's in Pittsburgh.
As far as names, like, who could you see her facing on those shows?
Well, that's the thing. It's a lot of people they brought back. You brought back like Riho's Sakazaki, Riho. You have people there. Sakazaki just beat Penelope Ford last week, so you've kind of just reintroduced her with a win.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Deeb and Thunder Rosa, I'm sure they could get if they wanted to.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure no shortage of people for her.
There was a press conference hosted by Tony Schiavone, who's got to be the busiest man doing all these segments. Next week, it's Santana and Ortiz against FTR. Dax says that they aren't that different. We respect you as wrestlers, but not as men. Ortiz says, we've been here since day one. You're just a pit stop until we get back and go for the belts. Santana brings out pictures. One of his mother at 15 after having him. The next photo of their shithole apartment in the Bronx. And then another where his mother had to take slumlords to court for a decent place to live. And then all got up yelling. Dax didn't have any photos to counter this argument with. So I think Santana won this one. And that's the match. Finally, we're getting it next week. In Charlotte, too.
I'm sure there was like a really good press conference when they were shooting this live. But this was so chopped up and so condensed into this 60 to 90 second segment that I really got nothing out of it beyond some of the visuals here. I just don't know why you would do something like this at all, rather than just maybe a quick promo from each person. If you're not going to dedicate the appropriate amount of airtime to it, it just felt like, hey, here are my props to try to get people to, understand a very deep story. And you just can't convey this sort of thing in such a small amount of time. So I do feel like still one of the big drawbacks of this nonstop pace of AEW Dynamite is we go right from Britt's pinfall, no time to digest or cool down from that win, and then right into the heavy tone of this press conference, essentially joint in progress where the participants are talking about poverty. And quickly, you just cut right to commercial after that. So I ultimately found it pretty ineffective when I thought there was a lot of potential to it.
Schiavone has teleported to the ring, and he brings out Andrade with his assistant, who has no name yet, and they have a surprise. And Tony introduces us. He is alerted on an iPad. So does that make Andrade a babyface?
if they went through Apple to clear usage of the Apple product, then perhaps.
Andrade has a new executive consultant, Chavo Guerrero Jr. And listen, Chavo came out. This place was pretty amped for Chavo Guerrero that I would not have predicted.
I mean, it's Texas.
It is, yes.
This crowd, like, I'm trying to think who they wouldn't go crazy for, okay? They would have gone crazy for, like, Hornswoggle.
Dude, when Abrahantes came out here and said, Penta says, they went nuts. Like, dude, this crowd was like, oh my God, Hardcore Holly is going to be the executive consultant?
They would have went nuts for Hardcore Holly. Are you kidding me? Like, it could have been anybody. It could have been like, Duke Drosy. Like, it would have went crazy. Like,
let me ask you this, okay? If I were to ask you who we're going to give Andrade a new manager.
Yeah.
How deep on your list of people you would want is Chavo Guerrero Jr.? Is he in your top 50?
No, because he's not on my radar because he has been so removed from sort of like wrestling conversation, or at least like this context of wrestling conversation for such a long time. But seeing him here, I thought it was a great choice. Number one, you don't embarrass Vicky by essentially kind of writing her off. You can essentially say, okay, we're keeping it in the family. I'm passing it off to you, Chavo. Vicky saves face. Guerrero's still attached to him. And Chavo sounds good. Like he can promo. He can probably take bumps too if you need. You're not a fan?
The jury's out. I want to see this guy. Like, Chavo, to me, like, entertaining character at different parts of his career. I'm looking at it that, and granted, maybe there are just extenuating circumstances that he can't be around, but to me, Conan was the guy. And if we were going to pivot to a new name, he was staring you right in the face. So to me, Chavo's going to have to be excellent in this role. And if he's great, believe me, I will totally be on board and say, hey, this guy was a great choice. But it's going to be
different. It'll be different from Conan.
He's never been in this role. So we'll see. We'll see. Is this guy going to be like a main event level promo for this guy that they have, presented as having that ability, and of which Conan would make this a main event act. So that's kind of like what your comparison point is.
Yeah, we'll see.
Chavo put over all the talent in AEW, but no one has as much as Andrade, and they get interrupted by the reunited Death Triangle. Pac, Phoenix, and Penta, all out here, along with Alex Abrahantes.
It's really the Death Square now with Alex Abrahantes.
It really is, yes. Andrade says, I'm a big superstar. And then Chavo translates for Pac, who notes, you only speak one language. And said his waist is shiny, but it should be shinier. Pac then says that Penta and Phoenix don't work for me. We are a family. And Phoenix says, we are the real fans of the Latinos. And this is where Abrahantes does the translation for Penta. Crowd was into it.
The real face of the Latinos.
The face of the Latinos. And you're not even on our level. And Andrade says everyone works for him, and they just did this pull apart here. They were very much teasing that these guys were going to turn on Pac, but instead we just got the pull apart.
That seems to be the story, right? It's Andrade trying to pull Penta and Phoenix away. Yeah. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe ultimately that'll happen, but I hope they don't break up the Death Triangle. I think they've really kind of yet to have that big story. They've really yet to reach their potential as a triple, as a 3-man team, I would say. I was not a fan of Andrade in this. I know he is working a lot on his English promo, and he wants to use it as much as he can, but it is far from TV ready for the amount of mic time that he has been given. It almost felt like he he grabbed the microphone and he just kept going on. And then it was almost like Chavo being like...
Chavo was like it begged the question, like, what is the function of Chavo if Andrade is going to do all the talking?
The bulk of the talking?
That's
exactly
what he did here. Like,
and that shouldn't be the case. I think you have Andrade there for his presence. Of course, he is the star. He says a few words that he sounds cool saying. It's not enough to be able to speak English. You have to sound cool speaking it, you know? And that's just a different barrier that he needs time to reach, and he's not ready for that right now, especially in AEW where the level is so high. So I hope they learn from this, because like there were at times where like Andrade speaking just unfortunately sounded awkward. He was talking a bit too much, and I feel like it just ended the segment flat. So you know, it's well and good to like have the man get that practice, but I hope they do it. I mean, Dark would be a perfect place, honestly. Like, that's where you get your developmental. Have the guy come out, cut a promo to the crowd, and, you know, like, get your practice that way. But when it comes to TV, I hope they leave most of it to Chavo from this point.
Earlier in the night, the Hardy family office was confronted by Marco Stunt. The rest of Jurassic Express got involved, and then Christian chased them off. So Cage, Luchasaurus, and Jungle Boy lay out the challenge against Angelico and Private Party next week, and Cage wants to end the Hardy family office forever.
We'll see.
Alex Marvez interviewed The Factory, and he was worried about a protein drink being poured on him and asked QT if he should owe Tony an apology. QT said, yes, I will apologize to him next week.
These guys just, you know, unfortunately at this point just come across as like bottom tier villains, you know, like on the level of like some of the lower ranked Hardy front office dudes. Ever since that QT loss and the lack of follow up, like, you know, it's just not felt big.
I can promise you this, that whatever the audience is for tonight's episode of Dynamite, there will be absolutely zero statements made by a fan of AEW who's going to call up or text his buddy and say, hey, 4 more days till we find out if Tony's going to get his apology. What do you think? Think QT's going to apologize? I think he's going to get the protein drink again. Yeah, me too. I can't wait. I can't bear it. Not a second time. Nobody is going to talk about this for the next 7 days.
Not every segment is going to be like a home run on these shows, but man, like,
why couldn't this be the 7th inning stretch? Couldn't we just like, you know, why don't we just do crowd shots? It's like, hey, look at all these people here. Look at these people came from Philadelphia. Yeah. That dude's from Baltimore. Crazy crowd. We'll be back with Orange Cassidy and the Blade. I don't need an angle in every single last minute of this show. I don't need Tony Schiavone in an angle with a protein drink with QT Marshall.
Well, obviously it's to set up whatever, I don't know, the Nightmare, what is it, the Factory's got coming up next. I don't know, we'll see. But Britt Baker, it's got to be Britt.
Britt comes to his
Tony's defense.
Maybe you'll do QT against Britt in Pittsburgh.
And she should destroy him.
Orange Cassidy against the Blade. Blade comes out and he's got his back towards Cassidy because he doesn't think Cassidy is coming because the brass knuckles had taken him out earlier. So apparently the Blade also has ear damage because he couldn't hear the man's theme as he came out.
No, he's saying because
he had his back towards him and wanted to be declared the winner because he thought Cassidy wasn't going to come.
The theme was playing. He assumed that Cassidy wasn't going to make it out. He assumed Cassidy was stuck in the back.
If I was in the ring and your music started playing, I would turn around and double check to see if you're coming.
Cassidy didn't come down the ramp. Cassidy came through the crowd.
Okay. So why did he have his back away from the entrance? He wasn't even looking.
I think he was. I think he was glancing at the entrance, and then he was like, oh, okay. He assumed that he wasn't making it out.
All right. Okay, you can have this one. So the match begins. Blade fakes a knee injury, but he's just playing possum and attacks. He gets hit with a Stun Dog Millionaire and then uses a gut wrench bomb, sending Cassidy to the floor. They come back after the break, and Cassidy makes his comeback. The bunny gets involved, gets stopped by Statlander, and then Cassidy does a dive to the floor and nails Statlander. Cassidy then shoves the blade into the bunny, and we get the quote, "She dropped her ears." I thought maybe there was a face swap here. But the ears were preserved.
No. Yes.
Blade hits a tombstone for a 2 count, and then Cassidy is selling his back, but is still able to hit the beach break. He can't immediately go for the cover, so there's a kick out. Bunny tosses the brass knuckles, and dude, Blade had to just dive for these things. This was like, it was like these things were on ice or something. Yeah. He gets them, misses with the knucks, and gets hit with the orange punch, and Cassidy wins. 8:44.
Yeah, I thought it was a good match. Obviously made better with the crowd's connection to Orange Cassidy. I thought there was a bit too much interference here, though, from Bunny and even from Statlander. But I thought like Blade looked pretty good. You know, he's a pretty consistent part of these shows, and I think has like a very devastating style. That gut wrench bomb into the corner turnbuckle looked amazing, and it looks like Orange Cassidy is keeping these brass knuckles.
Yeah, because he laid out the blade with an orange punch with the brass knuckles after. So, are we going to get Orange Cassidy against Sting?
Oh man, I think they should only wrestle in slow motion. Like they should only do a lazy match.
I don't know if I want to see a match between them.
I don't either. I mean, they're both baby faces. I think it was just a fun little vignette.
Marvez interviewed Chris Jericho's back. And he says, if MJF is going to bring the most violent and demented man in wrestling, I'm going to bring the most violent and demented version of Chris Jericho. I'm bringing vitamin C with the ass cream. No, he turned around, and we have the Pain Maker coming next week.
Yeah.
Out of context, this would throw a viewer.
Totally, yeah. Some people didn't watch Dynamite. They're going to be like, what? They're pairing Christian with Jericho and doing ass cream again? I think, you know, this got a good reaction. Everything got a great reaction on this show. The crowd recognizes the
I'm coming back as that version of Doink that I dressed up as before I attacked William Regal. Yeah!
They lost their shit. Doink. Are you kidding me? Jericho,
we got Doink and Chavo in the same night.
We get to see Jericho as Doink. Oh, I can't wait to tell my family about this. This is going to be amazing. Yeah, no, this crowd would have made it all up. This was appropriate, okay? Because like Jericho in AEW at least has established that the Painmaker is like it's his demon, like it's his elevated version, right? But
I so wanted a Nick Gage promo. Maybe we'll get it over the next week of Nick Gage cutting a promo on the Painmaker.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Sure. He should do like somebody should pay for a cameo just to ask for his thoughts on the Painmaker.
Please do.
But this. I have to say, like,
I want a Road 2 now with Nick Gage next week. I hope they do a Road 2.
Nick Gage on BTE, like, have him do the rounds, like everything. Stylistically, though, I don't know if like Jericho has been able to separate the Painmaker from like, you know, a typical Chris Jericho match. Like, what is that level of extra aggression?
There's going to be blood. That's what this is going to mean.
Blood.
There's going to be blood next week.
There has to be, yeah. It's a Nick Gage match.
In addition, in Charlotte, which they've sold a lot of tickets for this show. This has been a show that's done very well for them. Santana and Ortiz against FTR. Christian Cage, Jungle Boy, and Luchasaurus against Private Party and Angelico. Jon Moxley or Lance Archer defending the U.S. title against Hikuleo. The elimination match, we're doing the 5-on-5 elimination match, and the names listed here, we had Omega, the Bucks, Gallows and Anderson against Hangman Page, Evil Uno, Stu Grayson, Alex Reynolds, and John Silver is listed here, who has not wrestled since his injury back in March. Plus, we're going to get Tony Khan making a major new live event announcement.
All right.
A major live event announcement. And I guess we're going to get the Ricky Starks celebration with Brian Cage. So next week, folks, get ready. We've got Christian Cage, Brian Cage, Hangman Page, Nick Gage, and I think that's all of them, isn't it?
No Steel Cage?
No Steel Cage. Maybe they'll play some kill switch engage.
Yeah, sure. Maybe maybe if the show does well, they can all get a increase in their wage.
Oh,
yeah.
They were in Texas tonight. I was really hoping that maybe Sage would have shown up.
Ooh, yeah. Get him in there. All right. We've gone
Nick
far
Gage versus Sage Northcutt. And then in 2 weeks at Daly's Place, they announced Miro defending the title, and we are going to get Cody Rhodes versus Malachi Black. And it's worth noting that they're going to be filming the Go Big Show, the second season, in August. So there is the potential this could be a write-off for Cody, much like they did last year when he had to go film after the Brody Lee loss. So
must be.
That's a pretty big match for August 4th at Daly's Place with those two. And for the second season, Snoop Dogg can't do it, so John Cena's filling in.
Cena?
No, John Cena. They got DJ Khaled. Never mind.
Oh,
we're moving on.
That's too deep. I'm sorry.
I thought that would be at a level that would have.
Yeah, he does
landed.
look just like him.
I'm too tired. I'm done. Jon Moxley, Lance Archer, Texas Deathmatch for the U.S. title. These guys murdered one another. What'd you think of Moxley and the AEW Street Fighter collaboration T-shirt here with Moxley squaring off with Guile?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Maybe Jean-Claude Van Damme's coming in for All Out. They're gonna have a match.
Oh, I'd love to see Van Damme in AEW.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the next labor of Jericho.
JCVD against CJ. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Jericho, you may have gotten by Nick Gage. This man is an international movie star of such hits as Bloodsport. He played Guile.
We get the countdown clock for Jericho, but out comes the time cop.
Oh my God, dream match right there.
You and Lance were sudden impact, well, I'm bringing you sudden death.
Boom, there you go.
I watched a lot of Van Damme in my day. So, yes. Moxley and Archer. Archer gets annihilated by Moxley right as they're introducing him as being from Dallas, Texas, and he got a pretty big reaction. This was not like they were picking Archer over Moxley. They were both super over, but Archer, this was like a hero's welcome.
Completely. And I think you could see Moxley slowly, work more heelish as the match went along.
Yes. The champion working with the Texas native and did wonders here for Keith Lee. There was a paradigm shift on the concrete. Archer comes up bleeding, and Moxley introduces a fork. We come back from break. Archer's ankle is wrapped around the chair, and Moxley comes down, Pillmanizing the ankle, and then bites the wound on the forehead. There's 2 chairs set up. Moxley avoids the blackout, but then he puts the chairs back to back, and Moxley gets choke slammed onto these chairs. That looked unbelievably fun.
Sometimes, I think, okay, maybe fatherhood is going to slow some of these wrestlers down.
Oh,
not the case for this dude.
No, this guy's having his midlife crisis throughout his 20s and 30s.
Yeah. How the recovery for something like this, I feel like would take me like half a year.
Dude, back pain sucks. Okay, back pain sucks. I watch these.
Shit.
I would seriously, I would take the paradigm shift on the concrete. I'd do the barbed wire, but man, you're dropping my back on top of chairs. No, I'm out. I'm out. Done.
Insane. Yeah.
So Moxley fires back with a paradigm shift and a lariat. Archer rises up and gives him the middle finger and then stabs him with the fork. We've got barbed wire boards introduced that are placed onto 2 tables. Archer stabs Moxley with the fork and then chokeslams Moxley off the apron through the barbed wire tables, and Moxley can't get up at the count of 10. 13 minutes, 23 seconds. Lance Archer is your winner. I will say, you watch this and it was Texas. The reaction was awesome. This was really great booking, but it was not the outcome I was expecting. But this is, when you think about it, though, it's a way, they don't pin Moxley, but it's still a loss, a very rare loss for Jon Moxley. This was, there was no other way you could have ended the show. But this was taking.
I disagree, John. There's plenty of ways they could have ended this show. This was the best way of ending it, but they could have ended it with Lance Archer, the hometown person, getting pinned with Moxley's feet on the ropes.
You could have done that, yeah. You could have just beat him instantly. Lots of ways to have done this. And the ending I never would have expected was our closing shot of Lance Archer holding up his belt, staring down Hikuleo for next week.
When this show started, no, I did not expect this closing image.
Yeah, we're going to bookend the show with Nick Gage and Hikuleo.
Yeah. This match was fantastic. Absolutely, It lived up to the concept of a death match, and AEW has shown that they'll do this. They don't really care if it's a TV death match. It's not a downscaled death match whatsoever. This was like, man, a star on the level of Jon Moxley taking this level of damage is like unrequired, and I really do question it sometimes. But I mean, that's this guy has a reputation to live up to. I think probably has great reverence for what this would be able to do for Lance Archer, and probably wanted to, give this belt give this run with that belt a wonderful send-off. I didn't expect this. I thought Moxley would have made his way back to Japan somehow with the belt to drop it to, like a bona fide New Japan guy. Archer, at this point now, an AEW person taking on this belt, it makes you wonder what some of those logistics may be. I also wonder if this would be a quick short run for Archer before he drops it to Hikuleo.
I wouldn't drop it week one, having the belt. If I was New Japan, I'd want to get Archer on that LA show next month at the very least. I mean, that's only a couple weeks away. I would think you want him to at least be on that show, and Moxley's on that show as well. So you got to figure in whatever Moxley's doing on that show.
Well, what makes you think that why don't you think that they would have had Moxley keep the belt if the goal is to, you probably want to headline that show with a Moxley title match, but I guess it doesn't matter if he's going to be on the show either way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they obviously have another idea for Moxley on that show. I mean, you could also do the rematch.
Yeah, true. Oh God. But man, how do you follow this? It's like, I hate to see that again. Can you imagine you just telling us what you've been going through at the start of the show? Can you imagine staying up at 4 a.m. to the sounds of a crying child with whatever fucking back pain you're taking on from taking a choke slam on not.
Dude, my free time would not be landing on chairs and doing this. I would not be cut out for this. Not at all. But God bless Jon Moxley.
Crazy.
It was a great main event. The crowds to me have become the main event of these AEW shows, and it just seems like they are trying to come up with ultimate. It's like Tony Khan has had every fantasy idea for months, and now he gets to just go wild with these ideas. And I really think it speaks to an audience that is very conflicted now about what they get from their WWE product versus a company that there's nothing off limits. If we want to get a Nick Gage, we can do it. They are never going to run out of interesting ideas. If they were in a position, if Tony Khan was in the position where 3 weeks ago he was handed Raw, okay? And we've got no challengers for Bobby Lashley. I promise you Tony Khan is coming up with something that would be out of the box, that maybe isn't Bill Goldberg, but it just shows you that's the creativity they're working with. It's to satisfy the fan that knows who a Nick Gage is. And it's probably a bigger audience than some give credit to, but it's just fun to watch that they are not restricted by contracts. They're not restricted by promotions. If there's a great idea, they're going to move heaven and earth to make it happen.
Have you finished Loki yet?
Just go ahead. Make your analogy.
It's Kang showing up. I mean, it's Nick Gage's Kang, to somebody who doesn't really follow comics or some of the chatter online. I think seeing Kang basically means nothing. It's okay, here's a guy that, I don't know, is supposed to be a big deal, but I don't know who he is. But the hardcores definitely seem to care, and I feel like they are, the Marvel Universe has been as successful as it has because it's done a wonderful job of balancing its appeal across mainstream and diehard fans. But I feel almost with more of an ear to the diehard underground fan base, because those will ultimately inform everybody else. If you satisfy the hardcores, I feel like you can't go too deep into it, okay? Like, fuck, I don't know. Some names are probably like too underground, but Nick Gage is that perfect sweet spot that is like just bubbling from beneath the mainstream, only needs like, this type of exposure, and really just needs the education and the exposure of a Dynamite, and the rest the crowd will handle. This audience reaction is going to be enough to make him a star, and it's going to be spread to, as many audiences that are big fans of, Eddie Kingston every time he does one of these live shows now. So it's a very satisfying watch if you are somebody who pays attention. But even if you're not, I feel like you can at least trust that new stars are going to be made and be, respected as such on almost every edition.
So yeah, this was it was a fun show to watch. A lot of interesting stuff to just set you up for next week. Like I think there's going to be a lot of excitement for that Nick Gage involvement next week. And also, like that elimination match, like as we talked about, it's going to be interesting how they structure this show. Like I think that should probably be last. It should go long, but how long is it really going to go when you have all this stuff announced on top of it?
I mean, we could do it. I think at least half an hour. I feel like it's deserving of at least half an hour.
I think it should get like the last half hour of the show.
Yeah.
I don't want one of those elimination matches where we're just zipping through eliminations and it's every 2 minutes someone's out. I don't think we'll get that. I just hope it's paced, because you might be doing as many as 9 eliminations and you just don't want them to feel trivial. And
it's a lot of big names that are going to have to take pinfalls, presumably, in that match.
And it would also be interesting that I know the idea was thrown out of, okay, Kenny Omega just, maybe he's on the apron and then it gets down to him and he throws Cutler in there. Like, AEW has been very careful about when they advertise things, like they don't do that sleight of hand. That is kind of just commonly accepted in wrestling. Like they've been pretty good about, like when they put those 10 faces up there, I noted them because I think like AEW is not false advertising or just putting something up to just confuse you. Like even that time they did the deal with, it was the Young Bucks, and it was something like they specifically worded it like they were taking on, whether they said the Elite or something like that. Like they actually made the language so it wasn't a swerve. They didn't technically mislead you or false advertise something. Like it's something like they pay attention to. So in theory, like Page and Omega have to be in this match next week, and that's interesting.
Yeah, I think they'll follow through.
All right, let's go on over to the forum. Tonight's show, on a scale of 1 to 10, generated a 7 out of 10 rating. Starting things off is Jesse, who writes, the show was pretty good tonight. The main event was great. The women's match was disappointing. Neither Britt or Nyla seemed to be on the same wavelength and seemed to be off during the match. I love how AEW recognizes when something is not working and changes it. They noticed Vicky and Andrade were not working, so they decided to go with Chavo to represent him. I can see the Lucha Bros turning and joining forces with Andrade and being a unit, which would be cool. Nick Gage and Jericho next week should be great. We're all about to find out how far TNT will let AEW go when it comes to violence. So if true, how do you see Daniel Bryan and CM Punk joining AEW, changing the foundation of pro wrestling? I compare this to Hall and Nash joining WCW and changing the wrestling landscape. I mean, we talked a lot about the Punk thing. There is a report out there about Daniel Bryan. I have not been able to confirm that report, so I think it's, have to wait on that one. But to the other point, Way, I think just talking about the Gage and Jericho aspect of this question, it's fine. When you go back to one of the first scrums that Tony Khan did after one of the pay-per-views, he was asked about like the level of violence on the pay-per-view match and just stating like, you're not going to see that kind of stuff on TNT. That has obviously changed greatly of, I would say like with Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker as an example, like I don't think they have many restrictions when it comes to that aspect of things. And when you perform well, you're going to have a lot more leniency with your network than you might have on week 1 when Dynamite was just establishing itself. So I don't know if they have many restrictions when it comes to how far they can go.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, It's also a really interesting match that they would book as a first match for Nick Gage, because nobody thinks of Chris Jericho in terms of deathmatch wrestling. And, for Jericho, I feel like he's also the type of performer that understands the type of reputation that Nick Gage has and probably wants to prove himself in Nick Gage's world to have a style of match that I think fans would be satisfied with, especially if it's the guy's first match in AEW. So I could see there being like a decent level of violence and risk attached to it.
I would imagine, just guessing, that like I would not be stunned in the least that this was Jericho's idea of bringing in Nick Gage. Like it seems like the kind of idea he would have with a specific plan of what his thought process would be.
For the story, I mean, Jericho going through a bloodbath with, like this guy with this reputation, will probably help a lot, for the big story that they're telling overall. But it'll be interesting because I don't know what Chris Jericho in a death match is going to look like.
Are we going to get the podcast discussing the match after the fact with Jericho and Nick Gage?
If it's a big enough buzz attached to it. I mean, has Nick Gage been on Talk Is Jericho?
He's done interviews. I don't know if he's been on Talk Is Jericho.
Because I would love to hear. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got a Trent who says, I was live in the building both tonight and last week in Austin. I'm not sure how it came across on TV, but I felt like the crowd wasn't quite as great as last week. Still had some very high moments, though, like Chavo's debut. The death match was one of the craziest things I've ever seen live. This product feels completely on fire, and I hope they can ride this wave all the way to All Out.
The crowd came off very well. It was a high bar last week. I would maybe put last week's ahead. I thought that was one of the best crowds we've heard in a long, long time. So I don't think, but a pretty hot crowd tonight. That Chavo, I did not expect Chavo to get that level of reaction. Like that, you always get the surprise is going to automatically generate a certain buzz, but it was fairly sustained too once he came out and was in the ring.
Yeah. I mean, they looked at him as like a legend,
Next up here, we go to Dan. Another Dynamite in the books, and I continue to be a very satisfied customer. It wasn't the most consistent episode, but I got lots for my 2 hours. Heck, I'd give this a thumbs up on the strength of Alex Abrahantes' fashion alone. Count me among the weird pocket of folks that only know Nick Gage by reputation. Full marks to AEW for knowing how to present the dude in a way that has me gagging to see my first Nick Gage match. Well, I hope you're not gagging. I'm jazzed for my first Hikuleo experience, too. Picture-in-picture note, all commercials for the new Boss Baby movie are greatly improved by having Jon Moxley fork stab a guy's forehead in a portion of the screen.
Yikes.
That's pretty funny.
Maybe they'll do that in theaters as well, just like have the movie play with like Jon Moxley.
A man mutilating a guy with a fork. John and Wai, will you be watching the opening ceremonies on Friday for the Olympics? I guess they'll be like early on Friday, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be. You know what? Maybe I will watch it live because I'll probably be up. But I always have a slight curiosity about what production takes place, especially for this year's. I'm actually quite curious, how these Olympics are going to be handled, what they'll look like, So I'll probably pay attention.
Yeah, I was listening to some interview about the production of it and just ideas and stuff, and throwing out ideas of do you want the fake crowd noise? Because there's an argument in some events. The drama of all the guys lining up for the 100-meter dash, it's the quiet might actually add to it, but you're also so accustomed to this producer was noting the fact that even if it's a full arena, it's a hush when everyone's lining up and the gun goes off, but then the roar comes as the race progresses and you get the big climax at with the winner and such. I'm interested in that stuff too. I a very casual sampler of the Olympics, but the opening and closing ceremonies were never things I went out of my way to see. I would seek out certain events and stuff like that, but I'm sure I'll see a little bit. I'm more curious this year, just given the nature of things.
With such a wide array of different sports to have to account for, I mean, I imagine they'll have to kind of experiment with every single one. Go through some of the first few events for some of them and then determine, okay, this feels really awkward without audience noise. So let's call up the Thunderdome and get some of those MP3 files here and play them for at least the celebration or something. But
and you do have 3 weeks as well. Things can change. If they see something's not working, you're going to have to the broadcast rights for this are just like astronomical. It's like the television presentation is so, I mean, it's a huge reason why these games are happening.
We go up next to Jomo, who says, Shida watch, 63 days since a Dynamite appearance. Riho watch, 154 days since a Dynamite appearance. I mean, they're former champs and wrestle on YouTube, so they're healthy. What is the excuse at this point? Even mediocre white guy QT Marshall gets his nepotism spot on every Dynamite, and there can't even be a promo spot for your former champs. I love Britt, and I think Nyla is way better both on the mic and in the ring than many give her credit for, even with a botch or two. So I definitely don't want to see their time diminish. Maybe AEW can at least try to feature more women than Britt, her current opponent, and the seemingly MIA Jade Cargill. And how long can a guy tell us how good he is without doing anything or looking good? I hope they don't just have the Lucha Bros turn on Pac to have all the Latinos together, because Death Triangle rules, and I don't know why Penta or Phoenix would be slotted as lackeys for Andrade when I don't know any time he's looked on the Lucha Bros level other than the Gargano match. Anyway, I know Wednesdays are for fun, and AEW really is mega fun most of the time, so I'll leave with this wish I need spoken into existence. Please give Stu a Cesaro silver spot in the 5-on-5 match against the Elite, where he whips everybody's ass in one fluid motion.
Okay.
Yeah. I definitely kind of wonder, to me, it's been one of the biggest criticisms of this women's division. Whoever has the belt might get some feature time. It used to be in the past, okay, maybe like the champion would get some time featured, and Britt Baker, because Britt Baker is a star. Now Britt Baker has the belt, so I'll say at least it feels like the belt is on the top star in the company. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean very good things for everybody else on the roster. It continues to be that, Dynamite really just kind of has one women's storyline feud going on per episode, and I can't really say there's anything going on with Riho and Shida that I'm aware of. So it might just come down to star power, honestly, because, what story would you put Riho and Shida in? When you had Deeb and, Thunder Rosa in the mix, I guess you could at least justify 2 title matches. But you know what? They could put anybody on this show. I do feel like it's more of a ratings type of thing that they're mindful of. What do you think, John?
I mean, I think it goes to when we're talking about this of this balance of who is going to be featured, what are our biggest programs. I think there are going to be casualties in all of this, and that's kind of where it comes down to. I would say there's going to be males too that are going to be part of this equation that disappear for a while. Riho, I'm just looking here. I mean, She's been on 2 recent Dark Elevations since June 26th. And prior to that was that excellent match she had with Serena Deeb back at Double or Nothing. So I would certainly want to reintroduce Riho in a big way, because she hasn't been on Dynamite since February, as I'm looking here. So I would want to do build her up a little too. I don't want to see her just show up and just do a random match. I think you could do a lot with Riho in that sense. But yeah, there are just not enough slots for a lot of these new programs. And that becomes another question. And, if Rampage changes some of this, perhaps, but it's also when you're kicking off a new storyline, that is so much of your TV is now going to be dedicated to that. If you are programming, Dynamite from 2 weeks from now, it's okay, MJF and Jericho have to have a segment. They have to have some representation. Omega and Page have to have some representation. We have whatever angles we want to shoot for the following week's TV, because we want to have those key matches out. And then you have Cody and Malachi Black, a Miro match. There's only so many segments, and they fill up quickly. So it's not just the idea of, okay, we want to use Riho next week. If you want to launch something with her, it's also having a consistency. So we don't shoot an angle on this date and then we don't follow up with it for another 4 weeks as well. So that's the good and the bad that comes with all these different characters. Not all of them are going to have sustained stories. The hope is that you can keep people at a certain warm level so that a Lance Archer can naturally slide into a spotlight tonight and people take to him as a big deal, even though he has not been featured for weeks, months at this point.
Mm-hmm. I think it also largely depends on like, well, what are the big stars we are building towards for, the next tentpole events, like an All Out. And at this
you
point,
need challenges for Britt. Like you do need to be building up a challenger, and that's something they have not done. Like you are largely starting from scratch or bringing in someone like revisiting a Thunder Rosa, for instance, which is a rematch they should go to at some point. But yeah, that's like I would want to be getting an idea of what are we building up for Pittsburgh now. Get that. I would say by next week you sort of want to be teasing that because I don't think that should be just a 1 week buildup. I think Britt Baker needs to be in a major match for Pittsburgh, at least one of those TVs. Maybe it's the Rampage debut that she gets the big match.
It's got to be good enough for a main event.
Yep.
Not just for Pittsburgh, but for, everybody watching.
Yes.
All right, finally, we got a kid from Montreal who says, in the last few months, I've become really Sorry, was this yours, John?
Go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. I've become really fascinated by Nick Gage, and as soon as I heard MJF rattle off his accomplishments, I knew what was coming, and I literally yelped. Yes, everyone is excited about the other two who might show up, but for me, this was just as exciting. Top to bottom, this was a really solid show, and the main event was a great crescendo. Archer richly deserves a title, and I'm glad to see him get it in his home state, as opposed to what happened to Keith Lee. It feels like AEW are upping the ante every week, debuting new people and delivering big main events. I'm sure that Gage's appearance is a one-off this time, but longer term, do you think there's any chance AEW signs him? I feel like he's a little too wild to work on weekly TV, although I'd be happy knowing he had the security of a weekly job. Thanks for the show as always.
I think there's a really good, I think every single fan watching this, I just can't imagine Tony Khan not expecting Gage to have gotten this reaction. I don't think he would have been booked if he didn't think it would correlate to the larger audience. And I think everyone knows that next week, this guy's going to be among, if not the most over person on that show next week. So I can't imagine this being only a one-off.
He is in the same mold as an Eddie Kingston and the same as an Orange Cassidy. Two guys who are, I think, well, especially in the case of Orange Cassidy, I think somebody who everybody thought was, or many people thought, was really just kind of like an indie star, like an indie gimmick. And look at the great job they've done of transitioning him to a competitive mainstream act. I have no doubt maybe it'll require some tinkering, but I have no doubt they'll do the same with Nick Gage. They just have to let the guy speak.
What do you think was the turning point for Nick Gage that allowed for a reception like this tonight?
The Arquette thing was a big one. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the buzz coming off of his appearances with GCW and maybe GCW's rise, WrestleMania weekend, that's when I was exposed to him. Several of those shows might have been a spring break, or at least some of those shows in that weekend were just the aura around this guy when he walks out to that arena is unlike anything else that exists in professional wrestling. The fans have a connection to him that is so incredibly unique that you don't get anywhere else. And when you hear the guy speak, when his social media, even his social media, moniker just makes him such a unique, incredibly attractive character that's unlike anybody else. So for me, it's been constantly building, but I do think the Arquette thing was probably a big turning point, and the Dark Side of the Ring probably cemented it for a lot of people. And you know what? Let's be honest, we're still talking about a very small demographic. Next week, though, it's going to be the biggest match of his life.
It's very possible that next week, granted, it's going to be, once the Olympics start, I think we'll get a sense of what kind of competition are they going up against. It is going to be the Olympics on tape delay for what's airing in prime time, but that could be a factor. But it is not crazy for the idea that Nick Gage could be watched by over 1 million people next week. That's a very real possibility for that match to have over 1 million people watching.
That would be nuts. Well, nuts for him, just kind of it's Chris Jericho, so absolutely, you're right.
It should be right around 1 million, unless the Olympics are just doing insane numbers and hits everybody. I'm just wondering, from Dark Side of the Ring, what other figures could make their way to AEW that AEW could work off of. Like they've had some success now off of this franchise.
Oh man, it's done a lot for Brian Pillman Jr., of course.
Andrade's new executive consultant, Sherry Tyree, the Ultimate Warrior's first wife.
Yeah, that would be an out of nowhere selection for sure. Yeah,
they're doing that. They're doing that XPW episode, so I mean that gives you plenty of characters to choose from.
They're doing an FMW episode, so I feel like Onita is probably already like 1 foot in to AEW already. Like the next barbed wire death match they have, exploding barbed wire death match, Onita has to be involved. That's your certification that, hey, we're doing it right this time.
I'm sure there was a point along the way where Tony Khan was looking at, okay, is this too niche in wrestling? Not to say there's not an audience for it, but there's not a big enough audience for it. And I imagine that just seeing what has worked in just ridiculous levels has given him that confidence that, okay, we can go pretty deep here even within the wrestling audience, and we can make it work. If we got a great introduction, a great story, a great promo guy, I can be that much more adventurous with my ideas. That's something that appeals to me. It will appeal to a larger audience. Whereas maybe at the beginning of this, it was like, okay, that would work to a GCW crowd. It's not going to work on national TV. I'm sure that he has crossed that bridge where there's more faith in those kinds of characters, like where you could put an Onita on a pay-per-view and it might mean something.
Yeah, certainly. It's when you really think about it in that sense, like it feels like there's so many like names that you could possibly pull from in wrestling lore to show up on an AEW and wonder what sort of reaction that they would get, like random name right now.
Well, it's when you think about like the mindset
Taue showing up.
Well, I was going to go with had this been AEW launching before the man had passed away, I think by now we would have seen Dennis Stamp booked on an AEW show.
Wow, holy shit. The fourth labor of Jericho
is Dennis Stamp
in a trampoline match.
Yes. Rest in peace, Dennis Stamp. Yeah. But totally.
Tom McGee would get a huge reaction. Okay. Like who's the best wrestler? Okay. Like, let me try to think. Okay. Kenny Omega versus Tom McGee would be a match.
Dude, they'd be billed as like father and son. If you saw like Tom McGee in his prime, dude, he looks like the spitting image of Kenny Omega.
So true.
Don Callis comes out and cuts the promo. I called up your dad.
Yeah. You may have faced one Canadian. You haven't faced another. Yeah.
Oh, well. Well, there we go, everybody. We are going to bring another end to this show. A lot covered, a lot going on in the world of professional wrestling. But we are going to be back later on this week. Rewind to SmackDown, Friday night, 10:15 Eastern. All patrons welcome. And then we're heading into the weekend.
Yeah.
You excited?
Big weekend.
Yeah. What's going on this weekend? Oh, great.
The Tokyo Dome show.
That's right, the Tokyo Dome.
With a main event that might not be what's advertised so far.
That's part of the intrigue of what is the main event going to be on Sunday. We will find out. Are you going to watch that one live? How close to live are you going to watch it? Or is that going to be I'll watch it when I wake up kind of show?
Since it's a weekend, honestly, it'll depend. I might watch it during the Monday. It's also Braden Harrington's birthday. That's the other main event.
Oh God, he's just going to stay up and watch it right through, I bet.
Well, his birthday is on Saturday, but I'm sure he'll be up all night, all weekend.
Oh yeah, he'll just go right through. All right, well, a happy early birthday then to Braden Harrington. And that is it for us. Thanks for watching. Thank you for joining us live in the Zoom room if you are a double ice cap or espresso patron. And that is it. Good night.